For today, the motion before this House is this House would support the privatization of the Nigerian power sector to ensure economic development. On the proposition side, we have JC Best. In opposition, we have Cherryfield. To begin today's debate, let us welcome the first proposition speaker.
Okay, should we try this? 3, 2, go. In the heart of a nation where darkness defies the rising sun, where machines lay still and candles replace innovation, where the pulse of progress is slowed down by the weight of darkness, today we are here to ignite a new flame. Good day, Mr. Chairman, panel of judges, accurate timekeeper, and my co-debaters. I, who stands before you, is no other but Jikwoyi, and I am here to propose the motion that states that this House supports the privatization of Nigeria's power sector for economic development. Lest we put the cart before the horse, let us jump into some definitions. Privatization, as defined by the International Monetary Fund in 2001, the transfer of control of assets and companies from the public sector to the private sector. In this debate, it refers to giving private stakeholders the ability to own, control, and manage the distribution, generation, and transmission of electricity across the country. Next, we have the power sector, as defined by the ERC in Nigeria. This refers to the segment of the economy that deals with the generation, transmission, and distribution of electricity to homes and businesses around the country. Next, we have economic development. Todara and Smith in 2015 defined economic development as the sustainable improvement in the living standards of the population of a country over a period of time. These improvements reflect on their education, their health care, and their employment. Now, let us talk about privatization. Nigeria is blessed with natural resources, yet many people still live without access to electricity. Over 43% of our population lives without access to the national grid. That is a whopping 85 million people. Mr. Chairman, did you know that Nigeria only produces 3,500 to 5,000 megawatts out of its 12,500 production capacity? As a result of this, there are frequent blackouts, and many people still rely on expensive generating sets to supply their businesses. In turn, this has stifled economic growth. In 2013, there was an attempt by the government to privatize part of the power sector, but bureaucratic bottlenecks slowed down progress alongside government involvement. I know that full privatization will truly benefit the country, as it will attract foreign investment, bring about economic growth, and lower the cost of living. Now, why privatization? First of all, we can talk about efficiency and effectiveness. Privatization brings about allocative effectiveness, that is doing things the right way, and technical effectiveness, that is doing the right things. You know that Nigeria, a report by the National Electric Regulatory Council in Nigeria stated that Nigeria loses up to 40% of its production during transmission and of its electricity during transmission and distribution. Private shareholders will be able to reduce wastage and maximize profits and minimize loss and minimize inefficiencies. Countries like Chile and the United Kingdom have shown remarkable growth, as reports said by the International Energy Agency in 2021, where after privatizing the energy sector. Secondly, we can talk about how cost reduction can be brought into the picture. The public electricity in Nigeria is not expensive because of the raw cost of producing electricity, but it's expensive because of financial leakages and inefficiencies brought about during the process of production. It will interest you to know that it costs 300 naira per kilowatt hour to run the conventional generating set, compared to 68 to 100 naira per kilowatt hour to use the public system, according to a report by All Owned in 2021. But you wonder, why doesn't everyone then now use the public system, since it is much cheaper? This is because the system cannot cater to the needs of all the people in the country at the same time. Thus, many people still rely on these more expensive generating systems, which in turn increases the cost of living and prices of goods and services. Private investments will be able to introduce competitive pricing, lower costs, and reduce government's burden on the power sector. That way, they will be able to invest in other places.
Sorry, you said that there are frequent blackouts. So, I have a question. So, what you're trying to say is that since Nigeria there have been frequent blackouts, or did you mean that was?
The frequent blackouts have happened before the privatization. It is because of this government interference in the attempt to privatize the power sector. That is why these blackouts still exist. Next, we'll be talking about removing corruption. The Nigerian public officials are notoriously corrupt, as Nigeria ranks 140th out of 180 countries ranked and scored a score of 26 out of 100 in the Corruption Perception Index in 2024. Privatization introduces anti-corruption schemes and will bring in auditable records, consumer accountability, and independent performance charts. Next, we can talk about the instrumentality principle. This talks about how the means justify the ends. This, in simple terms, if you want to achieve a goal, you need to use the right tools to achieve this goal. The Nigerian public sector has shown time and time again that they have been unable to have the adequate resources to provide constant electricity for all the people in the country. As a result of this, there have been frequent blackouts. Nigeria has had a score of minus 0.85 in the government effectiveness test held by the World Bank in 2023. This shows that the government is not well aligned with its systems in order to produce effectiveness around the country. In order to further my argument, we can talk about how privatization has brought about some promise. Ever since 2013, when attempts were made to start privatizing the electrical sector, we have seen an increase in our overall output from 3,000 megawatts to 5,600 megawatts. Full privatization could bring about more of this growth, and the government will be able to spend more of its focus on other things like education and healthcare. Next, we can talk about public management has failed. There is a popular proverb that only a fool does something twice and expects a different result. Time and time again, we have seen how the government has failed to give us constant electricity in our country. I feel this is high time we let private investors take charge of this system so that they're able to produce sustainable results. Remember the power holding company of Nigeria before it was dissolved and partly privatized in 2012. Between 2005 and 2012, it lost over 1.6 trillion in subsidies. No private investor will let that money go to waste. Next, we can talk about countries that privatize. Example, the United Kingdom have seen dramatic reduction in the price of electricity in the country over years. Reports from Polit in 2008 say that the real cost of electricity has dropped by 30% in recent years. Now you can talk about how privatization can bring about better income collection. Reports by the NERC in 2023 show that we have seen an improvement in the way we collect funding from electricity between 2013 and 2023 as a result increment of from 40% to 69%. With these arguments, I hope I have convinced you. Thank you.
We thank the first proposition leader for that fine speech. Let us welcome the opposition leader.
To everyone listening and watching this, before I begin my arguments and debates, I would like to remind the House of one key thing. The last time Nigeria privatized its power sector, it did not bring about electricity, no. What it did bring about, however, is darkness with a price tag. So today, we, the opposition, are standing here proudly, not just to rise and speak, but to completely stop this motion in its tracks before Nigeria makes another grave danger and they pay for more than what they paid in the past. Honorable High Panel of Judges, my respected proposition, my co-debaters, my well-attentive audience, listeners and viewers at home, good day. My name is Ms. Ohuche Chizoba Deborah from Cherryfield College, Jikwoyi, Abuja. I am the chief speaker of the opposition. I'm here with my friends and co-debaters, Ms. Nnebife Chisom and Master Ayuwa Michael. We, the opposition, stand here firmly to oppose the motion which states that this House supports privatization of Nigeria's power sector to ensure economic development. Now, today, the proposition wants to play the part of economic magician. We all know who a magician is. They want to pull out privatization from a hat, put it on and call it development. But we've already seen this trick before. You do not sell your lungs in order to breathe better. So as you do not sell your power grids in order to gain power. What the proposition calls a solution, history calls it failure. We call it failure. And as so, you do not call and bring in privatization in a country where accountability is still a myth. And with that, I would like to define my key terms because I am in opposition to the key terms given by the first speaker. I have a better preference. Now, what is privatization? Privatization is the process of transferring ownership of a business, service, or let's say industry from the public sector, which is the government, to the private sector, which are individuals, companies, etc. What is the power sector? The power sector is the sector of Nigeria which all sources of power generation, transmission, and distribution are come out of or are distributed. Now, let me break this down to understand my debate further. It is only one transmission company we have due to the latest changes. We have about a number of gencos and distros. Those are generation companies and distribution companies. Please keep that in mind. Now, moving on to my first point. One thing that we must all realize is that privatization failed, full stop. There's no other thing. Okay, let's get into it. In 2013, Nigeria privatized its power sector. They promised stable electricity, massive investments, but let me tell you what they did give us in fact. As of 2023, did you know that the national grid of Nigeria, what powers Nigeria, actually, it collapsed. Not once, not twice, not 3 times. Okay, I think it's up to 4 times. 46 times the national grid collapsed. What do we say to that? But wait, who was in charge? Who was in charge of all of this? Oh, I know who was in charge. It was in the hands of the privates. Are we helping ourselves? Furthermore, if you did your research correctly, you would know that Nigeria yearly spends up to a staggering amount of 14 billion naira, sorry, mistake, billion dollars in buying generations yearly. Generators yearly, 14 billion. What is all this? And lastly, the private firms that we are all holding up so high and mighty because they are foreigners in their knights in shining armor. Let me tell you this. Did you know that the government bailed them out of debt of public funds with an mind-blowing amount of 1.3 trillion naira debt? The private firms? As how? What do you mean by that? I ask again, are we helping ourselves? And then the proposition comes to me to stand today and tell me, privatize again. Privatize what? Privatize what? You want the same disaster with a different signature? Okay, maybe if they turn it sideways and they sign it, we won't expect the same outcome. Please, let's be real. And if you don't believe that, that means, it just simply means that you aren't living in the harsh reality of Nigeria's economy. Okay, now moving on furthermore to my second point. One thing is that institutions are too weak to handle privatization. Keep this in mind. Institutions are too weak to handle privatization. Most discos, that is distribution corporation or companies, they are regional monopolies. No competition, no accountability. You cannot privatize your way out of a dysfunction if your referees are sleeping or they've been bought. I tell you the truth. The institutions, they are too weak to handle this high and mighty privatization. Now, Are we doing, is privatization the cure, or are we just privatizing corruption? These are things we must ask ourselves. The NERC is no longer a regulatory body, let me tell you all. It is a puppet to the foreign, like, they don't even think for themselves. They are puppets. And you are saying, let's go and privatize again. What are we solving? We are creating more problems, let me tell you. Moving on. Another important part. Now, please, panel of judges, if you take anything from my argument, let it be this. Power is a right. It is not the rich man's playground, please. Electricity is not a commodity. It is the oxygen for development. Without electricity, there is no education, no healthcare, no business, no digital economy. And let me tell you something that you do not know. When private firms are in charge of this oxygen, they decide who breathes and who chokes. Let me tell you something. Ever since privatization, the tariffs have increased and skyrocketed. Just to let you know. Did you know? How can we account for all of this? Who suffers when there is a bill on light? Who suffers when electricity is being sold? The major part of this motion is not development. It is to hide the people who are behind it. And those are the private firms, by proposition. Now, moving on. Now that I have exposed these crack layers in my arguments, the truth is, reform is better than retreat. We are not against progress. We are against repetition. We have tried this before, for crying out loud. What do you expect? We see countries like Rwanda and Ethiopia. They have made large, they did not abandon. Did you know? If you did your research, they did not abandon. They improved. They did not sell it, they improved. Now, Ethiopia, one of the rising, most sustainable countries when it comes to electricity. Did you know that they have made breakthroughs? Let me talk about Rwanda. Through hydroelectricity, they have now increased their electrical source from 10% to 60% in 10 years. And was from 2013 to 2023. What do we have? 46 power grid out, this thing failures. What are we giving to ourselves? I would like to enforce one thing. This is a major issue. What we can do to fix it, actually, I would like to conclude by saying we must vote for Nigeria and we must understand that this motion needs to fall. Thank you.
We thank the opposition leader for that fine speech. Let us welcome the second speaker from opposition.
PDP, power to the people, they say, but it is an umbrella that covers the progress of the power system here in Nigeria. APC, change has come, but it's the broom that sweeps away the progress of the power sector here in Nigeria. Ms. Chairman, panel of judges, accurate timekeeper, co-debaters, ladies and gentlemen, and my fellow students, I duly extend all courtesy. Before your very face is Eme Eric Ene, an executive business pundit from the house of JC Best Schools International, and I am here to serve as a guide, leading you all to the inevitable conclusion that this house supports the privatization of the power sector in Nigeria to ensure economic development. As I sat in my chair listening, wondering and pondering on the statements of the chief opposition speaker, As I sat on my chair listening, wondering and pondering on the statements of the chief opposition speaker, I realized that as I stand here not as a debater, but as an executive pundit. I not only take the stance of a debater, but I have come here with the mantle of an executive pundit, here to... Mr. Chairman, this is not a case of... Do I have stuff on the top? Yes. Mr. Chairman, this is not a case of perjury, neither is it a case of libel. It is a case that aims at national development, and economic growth. The discussion that we will be having today is geared towards not speech eloquence, but rather fundamental truths that is backed up with historical data, statistical data, and it is the only reason, and it will show the only reason why economic development can be attained via the power sector, and it is only by privatization. The current state of electricity supply here in Nigeria is characterized by inadequate infrastructure and constant power outages, and this unfavorable characteristics stifles the industrial growth and hinders the potential of small and medium-sized enterprises in Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that is endowed with vast human and natural resources, and yet we remain hampered by systemic inefficiencies, and that is why the quest for sustainable economic development, especially in our power sector, is paramount to all Nigerians. The cry for privatization in the power sector in Nigeria is a topic of extensive discussion for many years because our country is one that has faced significant power challenges. I will be giving you key reasons in this debate for supporting the need for privatization, along with relevant statistics and references. Mr. Chairman, according to the Nigeria Electricity Regulatory Commission, it will interest you to know that Nigeria installed generation capacity stands at 13,588 megawatts, yet only about 4,554 megawatts is readily available on average, leaving a capacity of 60% idle. On the 23rd of June in 2020, the World Bank Forum found that nearly 47% of Nigerians lack grid access, and those with access endure chronic outage problems. And the economic cost of these chronic outage problems is costing our economy approximately $28 billion every year. Frequent grid collapses cost up to $29 billion every year, which undermines our investor confidence and cripples the small and medium enterprises. This births a loss of 16% of annual sales due to electrical outages. Therefore, there is a call for privatization, and this beckons the question, why privatization? First of all, there is efficiency gains. Private investors who are often profit-oriented are driven by profit incentives, and they invest in maintenance. I will attend to your POI when I'm done. Thank you. And they invest in maintenance and minimize technical losses. Evidence from other markets show that privatized utilities have reduced their losses by up to 10 to 15%. Secondly, we have capital mobilization. The World Bank estimated that over the next 10 years, Nigeria will need $100 billion, which is about $10 billion every year, in order to improve and maintain a reliable electricity supply system. States in Nigeria cannot afford this amount, and so privatization, private investment is the answer. Both local and government and foreign private investors can close this gap. Thirdly, we have accountability and innovation. Competitive pressure in the private sector competitive pressure will compel and improve service quality, adapt smart grid options, and technologies and implement cost-effective tariffs that attract further investments. Finally, Mr. Chairman, according to Dr. Adalbert Winkler in 1998, there is a positive significance between the financial market and the economic development. Once the power sector is fully privatized, it increases the activities of the financial market, which in turn improve income and living standards of Nigeria. Mr. Chairman, privatization of the power sector in Nigeria is the right path to economic development. The Chief Speaker of the Opposition insinuated on this very podium yesterday that according to the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics, reliable power is the bedrock of agriculture. Permit me to add that it is also the bedrock of industry, healthcare, and digital services. According to the Adeleke University Journal, every 1% of improvement in electricity reliability in sub-Saharan African countries correlates a 2.86% GDP uplift. Mr. Ajay Banga, the president of the World Bank, stated that privatization is a tested and proven mechanism to attract and deploy the capital necessary for the Mission 300, which aims to electrify 300 million Africans by 2030. My panel of judges, the Nigeria experience has given us a robust history of public sector incorporations that were privatized due to mismanagement and corrupt practices. Corporations such as the Ughelli power plant in Delta State, which was privatized in September of 2012 after being sold to the Transcorp Ughelli Power Limited for $300 million. Its current status after being privatized is that it has undergone capacity enhancements and has contributed significantly to the power generation supply here in Nigeria. Secondly, we have the Keystone Bank Limited. In March of 2017, it was sold by the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria to Sigma Gulf River Bank Consortium for 25 billion naira. And as of the latest available data, the bank's total assets were valued at 307.5 billion naira. In summary, Nigeria's power sector is slowly expanding capacity with major projects such as the Zungeru Hydro project that is coming online and also new IPPs in the pipeline. Meeting these ambitious targets of 42 gigawatts by 2030 will require concerted efforts on the infrastructure and reforms. Privatization is not a gamble. It's a strategic investment in Nigeria's future. By endorsing this motion, you endorse jobs, you endorse growth and reliable power for all. Let's make that endorsement today. Let this House vote for progress. Thank you.
We thank the proposition speaker for that fine speech. Let us welcome the second opposition speaker.
Electricity is not just economic, but it is geostrategic. It powers our hospitals, our data infrastructures, our National Bureau of Statistics, our institutions. Why would we expose these facts to foreigners and politically exposed businessmen? Why should we open a wound for other people to put salt inside? Why should we do that? By privatization, we are giving the private hands and firms control to destroy us, to lead us to our ends. That brings me to my second point. The rural sectors of Nigeria or regions will not be developed. The motion believes that privatization is what we need for economic development. We oppose that. We do not believe that. Do you know why? Because that is not true. When people start putting numbers before citizens, that is what leads to the fall of a country. Private firms will not go to rural areas. Why? Because there's little to no profit to be made there. They can't make enough profit they will make than when they major or concentrate in the urban areas. So why would they risk themselves from losing profit by going to the rural areas? They won't do that. Why would they take that risk? Public and private partnerships are better and smarter. There's a better way. Privatization means complete handing over of the sector. Why should we completely hand over one of our most precious and sacred sectors to private hands alone? Why should we do that? The proposition is giving arguments and using phonetics and grammar to distract us from the main points that we are meant to be looking at. There's a better and smarter way into solving and creating economic development. We can develop the economy of Nigeria by not just privatizing the power sector. So privatizing the power sector will lead to economic development by night, overnight. Maybe overnight, tomorrow, dollar will not be 1,400 to 1,400 naira to $1 if we privatize our power sector. We are distracting ourselves from serious and pressing matters and focusing on privatization of the power sector. My first speaker clearly mentioned that this debate has been debated before and it lost. So proposition, I would like to ask you, do you think you can win this debate today? By telling us to go back into where we have failed? Exactly, you won't. Privatization is not the solution, but it is a disease. It is not the cure. The proposition, they said frequent blackouts when They said frequent blackouts happened when Nigeria wasn't privatized. I would like to ask you, if you go to your homes today and they take lights, would you be shocked? You won't be shocked because it's happening now. Would you be surprised? I won't be surprised personally. There are current blackouts everywhere in Nigeria. I can go home. I'm sitting in my house, the comfort of my house, where I know we pay for our electricity and blackouts happen. How am I expected to feel? The tariffs are constantly increasing, but there is low provision of electricity. Why? Because it is in private hands. They can do what they own. They can do what they choose because they own it after all. It is happening in Nigeria currently today. When the Nigerian government tries to give the discos regulation policies, they threaten lawsuits and pullouts because they own it. Nigeria should wisen up and be smart. Come out of privatization. It is not helping us. My first speaker mentioned it all. She's supposed to have cleared your doubt by now, but I can see on your faces you still have some doubt there. Why privatization should work? It should not work, it cannot work, and it should not stand. Why should it stand? Failure. Failure should continue to stand in Nigeria. Are we failures? We are not failures. Some people may think that Nigeria is not going to succeed, but I personally think we can come out of this black hole we are in. I personally think we can leave this problem of underdevelopment of our economy. And I'm so sorry to say, it is not by privatization of the power sector. That is one of the major cures of it. That's one of the major problems of it. We are not helping Nigeria. Instead, we are giving it more reasons why it should not succeed. Some of the propositions people might know people who privatization is helping, making them want to push this motion further. But I stand to tell you here today, I'm so sorry to say that. Those people you know should return the power sector back to the government. in order to obtain full access to all Nigeria. If only one sector or only one region of the economy is developing, that is not economic development. If all areas in that country do not feel it, that is not economic development. We are only developing one part. If only Abuja is having constant light and constant light, where is the development there? Or are we developing Abuja or are we developing Nigeria? Please take heed. The policy blackmail and constant political threats. What happens if the owners of power say they don't like the policy Nigeria made that's actually helping us decide to start providing light? What will we do then? We'll fold our hands and beg them to come back. It's beg we have to beg because they own it. I would like to conclude by saying there is a smarter way. We do not oppose electricity, but we oppose exploitation. We do not oppose development, but we oppose destruction disguised as development. We do not oppose the private sector, but we oppose the uncontrolled checking, controls, and regulations there. Please, the proposition, do not be deceived by this motion into thinking privatization is the way. Be wise and be smart, and come out of that delusion today. Thank you.
We thank the second opposition speaker for that fine speech. Let us welcome the third speaker from proposition.
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, now lend me your ears. Let's not trade truth for tales. Let reason speak and let facts occur. I am Obumeyan Christine, an executive business pundit from the house of JC Best Schools International. I rise to reinforce a national truth that this house supports that the privatization of Nigerian power sector power sector to ensure economic development. And I will be discussing and exposing the experiences of the international arenas be discussing and exposing the experiences of other players in the international arenas as it relates to economic development, as it relates to the privatization of the power sector. Many countries have privatized their power sectors with varying degrees of success. Some notable examples include the United Kingdom, the Philippines, and Brazil. Additionally, Latin American countries like Chile and Argentina have also embraced privatization, as have Asian nations like Pakistan and Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, suffice me to postulate that it is glaring that privatization of power sectors has led to several positive benefits. For instance, in the UK, the privatization of the power sector has led to an increase in the efficiency, in the sense that private companies which are driven by profit motives have improved their performance in the power sectors. According to a report by the National Audit Office in 2019, the average price of electricity for households in the UK increased by 27% between 2007 and 2018. This is a reasonable improvement given the situation of things before it was privatized. In fact, a study by the Competitive Market Authority in 2020 found that the energy market in the UK was not always working in the best, as selling started owned assets generated revenue, for the fact that privatization of the power sector can also indirectly benefit other sectors. More so, it created a more competitive market in the UK because privatization, often coupled with regulation, aimed to introduce more competition into the market, potentially leading to lower prices, better service quality. It has led to improved efficiency or performance in some privatized firms, broadened domestic equity ownership, and generated new sources of tax revenue. In the late 1800s, electricity became the preferred method for street
lighting in Australia, and it was long before local councils across the states became responsible for coordinating electricity supply infrastructure. The first power station in Sydney was completed in 1904 at Plymouth. By 1949, there were 157 electricity suppliers. Let me repeat that. 157 electricity suppliers, either generating or distributing electricity to people across the states. Post-World War II, the burgeoning company and lack of new investments during the war led to the state government to form the Electricity Commission under the Electricity Commission Act 1950. The commission acquired power stations and distribution networks and gained centralized control over new investments in generation and the interconnection of distribution networks. The centralized monopolistic electricity supply industry performed its function with little scrutiny until the early 1990s, when it underwent a reform. In 1991, the Industry Commission estimated that the reform of the electricity supply industry will result in the national output expending $2.2 billion annual. Individual state governments and the Council of Australian Governments began the process of reform of the industry. State grids were connected to form a national grid, which allowed the commencement of a national electricity market. The reforms were given a boost with the release of the Hilmer Report in national competition in 1993. Brazil has been actively participating in the privatization of their power sectors since the 1990s. Brazil has been actively privatizing its power sector since the 1990s, primarily driven by a need to address the fiscal deficit and improve the sector's efficiency. This process has involved the sale of both electricity generation and distribution companies, leading to a mix of state-owned and private entities in the sector. The privatization process in Brazil has provided fiscal relief for states and federal governments by shifting the burden of operating and maintaining the power sector to private entities. The Brazilian Electricity Regulatory Agency, ANEEL, has implemented rules and clauses to stimulate competition and incentive innovation in the private sectors, potentially leading to technological achievements and more efficient energy. One may argue that the privatization of power sectors has negative consequences like increase in energy prices and fuel poverty. Nevertheless, we can agree to the fact that the merits strongly outweigh the merits. Bearing this in mind, let us be pertinent that we embrace this same act that has yielded many positive benefits in other countries of the world to make our country a better place. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, saving the best for last. Good day, Mr. Chairman, panel of judges, accurate timekeeper, my fellow co-debaters, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and fellow students. Ladies and gentlemen, concluding this speech, let us ponder on the lessons that Nigerians should learn from the privatization of other power sectors in other countries around the world, and let's agree that privatization will work in Nigeria. Thank you.
We thank the proposition speaker for that fine speech. Let us welcome the speaker from opposition.
Today, the proposition has painted Nigeria's future as a portrait, saying that Nigeria will see it as being powered by privatization. It sounds real, but let's look at this. Unlike it's being painted on a stained canvas, let's look at it like this. What they offer is not unemployment. What they offer is not development. It's a mirage of marketing magic in the desert of dysfunction. One of the major points of the opposition here today is to regard and to expose these leaks between these cracks. Expose these cracks between these leaks. I stand here today to oppose this motion that says that that this House will support the privatization of Nigeria's power sector to ensure economic development. My name is Ayoa Michael, and here I would like to ask, what do we really understand by development? Do we see it as a rise in tariffs? Do we see it as foreign dependency? Do we see it as wider inequality or urban bias? Let me disagree with you when you say privatization will bring about investment and efficiency. Let's look at South Africa. South Africa being one of the largest countries in Africa economically and growing globally. They introduced the privatization system in the early 2000s, and what happened? They encountered rolling blackouts. They encountered load shedding and price hikes. Is this really the path you want Nigeria to walk down through? You want Nigeria to wear the same blindfold that South Africa wore, covering us from the truth? No. Now, let me dismantle what remains of the proposition's case. My first point being that the proposition lies on theory rather than evidence. You say that you are showing us what privatization should do rather than what it has actually done. The first speaker here, Mr. Uche Chizoba, stated that tariffs have been doubled since 2013. Grid reliabilities have been worsened. We have seen bailouts exceed 1.3 trillion naira in Nigeria. The first supporting speaker stated that Nigeria has compromised its national security. Job losses have increased. We have seen rural regions being neglected. And what does the proposition have to say about that? Hypotheticals. They have to say hopes, buzzwords, hoping to give us what? An idea isn't good because it sounds good. It is good because it really works. Wise words from Honorable Deborah O. Moving on to the second point, we state that the proposition is contradicting themselves. The proposition is contradicting themselves in the sense that they say that private firms are efficient. Have you looked at it? Then you argue that our regulators are weak to monitor them. You say that competition will increase supply, but Nigeria's electrical supply is geographically monopolized. Each disco has a regional control, and there is no competition. So I would like to ask, what are you talking about exactly? Efficiency or fantasy? You say that if we increase tariffs, we improve services. But as tariffs have increased, we did not increase services. Let's take on. You said that private sectors will be more efficient. Let's use the UK as example. You use the UK as an example. Let me too use it. The UK is an example in the sense that when they introduced the Privatization Act in the early 1980s, they led to widespread energy poverty, price surges, and the private firms profiteering from energy crisis. Now, wise words of Professor Chukwuma Soludo states that privatization without capacity is chaos in a suit. Do you expect Britain, who is rethinking about their privatization act, to continue with such policy? The UK is planning on rationalizing from power policies. How do you expect Nigeria, with its weak regulators, and compared to the strong regulators in Britain, who are planning to rethink their privatization acts? Nigeria, with its weak regulators, do you think we can practice that? No, obviously we can't. Now, moving on to the third point, development without inclusion is a lie. You plan on including everybody in the nation, but I would like to ask, who exactly is benefiting from privatization in Nigeria? This is the heart of the question on this matter. If this your privatized system falls again, who will suffer? The investors or the people? Who will bail them out like last time? Nigeria has tried this many and multiple times to privatize their energy, but it hasn't worked out. Please answer me, who will take the blame this time? Is it the investors or the people? Because I know it's not the rural woman in Enugu, the shops in Asaba. It's not the school in Osogbo, the factories in Kaduna or Lagos that will take blame. Rich investors and private investors see where profits are, while the government sees where people are. A wise quote once said that the future isn't sold, the future is built. Wise words from Mohammed Sanusi II. Now, in addition to what I've said, we have to realize that we are offering a viable alternative. We are not only here to destroy the proposition's arguments, but to restructure, rebuild, and make a stand strong. We are here to analyze we are here to annihilate every single atom of doubt in the panel of judges. We have made solutions. We show that with regulations, decentralizations, and with renewing microgrids, we can close the access gap. We show that with accountability and not ownership, we will be able to drive performance. We show that we can achieve public-private partnerships that can work as like the Bangladesh and Lagos Island IPP. I would like to further mention that if privatization is so effective, why did Nigerian government bail out private power firms with over 1.3 trillion naira? As you stated earlier, why? You said that the hard-earned money of those private investors didn't go to waste. Why did Nigeria bail out of the private power firms with over 1.3 trillion naira? Why? Referring to the first speaker over here, who spoke about reform rather than retreat, we should follow their example. We should follow the example of existing African countries such as Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia, who have built and maintained public administration of their power supply, who have power source soaring across all nations in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, panel of judges, Mr. Moderator, let's take a step back and analyze what we have heard so far. Let's see the full picture. The proposing team here has spoken to us with excitement, but we here have spoken to you with experience. We here have given you models. We here have given you Nigeria. They here have given you models. They preach about dreams. We give you data. So on all that we stand in the fork at the road, one part sells our future to the highest bidder. The other invests in our people, our youth, our system, and our sovereignty. Ladies and gentlemen, and why we are here opposing this topic with reason, evidence, and integrity, we hope and we ask that you please reject this motion completely. Thank you and God bless. Choose vision, choose Nigeria.
Thank the third proposition speaker for that fine speech. Let us welcome the reply speech.
The proposition case lies on theory, not evidence. The proposition is contradicting themselves. Development without inclusion is a lie. That's not development. Consideration of the opponent's or opposition's viable alternative. Privatization involves policy, blackmail, and chaos. Privatization threatens national security. Rural Nigeria will be abandoned. Public-private partnerships work better. They are selling us the same poison in a prettier bottle. Privatization in Nigeria hasn't reduced the burden. It just changed where receipts go. And where do they go? To the private hands. Can we trust privatization in a system that can't even regulate generators? Can we really? Proposition. To sum this all up, I hope you can understand that this motion simply has to fall. Not only by logic, by strategizing, by even rebuilding on whatever they have said, but by the fact that privatization cannot even work in the country in the first place. Hence why it has failed, if you have done your research. They offer theory, we bring reality. They talk profits, we talk people. They light shareholders while we want to light up Nigeria. They say trust the market. But my dear proposition, let me tell you something. Nigeria has trusted the market before, and they have failed us. They have failed us. Why should we trust them again? You don't outsource your future. Let me tell you what you do to it. You build it. You don't sell your power. You empower your people. And with this, I hope that you have been able to understand exactly where the opposition team is heading with this. I hope that you are convinced and you are not still believing the lies that they are selling to you. Ladies and gentlemen watching this, wherever you are, especially family, I hope that you have been able to see the reason in our team's points and what you have been able to say, because we have done the proper research and we have understood the weight of this topic. We are not debating fantasies. We are not writing poetry. We are talking about policy, things to shape Nigeria. We are not thinking about the past and what this actually had to offer to us back when we were still fools. If the UK and other big countries are actively trying to reverse their privatization, I don't think that's where we should be heading. Honestly, there is a bigger, brighter light ahead. And once you look in the position of the opposition's team, I can promise you, you see it and you believe in it. Trust in your people. Trust in Nigeria. You don't sell it out to foreigners who can do away whatever they please with it. With this, I hope I was able to help you see the reason in our points, see the logic in our statements, feel the weight of our words. Understand that this isn't just a debate we're doing here. We are building the future of Nigeria. Thank you.
We thank the reply speaker from the opposition. Let's welcome the final speaker from JC Best.
It's essential to examine the assumptions behind my opponent's claims. Today, I will demonstrate how their statements rely on flawed reasoning and unsupported facts. The second speaker talked about breaking trust, but let's be honest with ourselves. How long have we trusted our government to giving us sustainable electricity? How long have we trusted that today, that with full assurance that there will be light at home? How long? Nigerian government have broken trust time and time again. I can't contest. They put the cart before the horse. They talk about how keeping things in the hands of the public sector is doing well for the country. In debating this important topic, it is vital to dissect the arguments presented by an opponent, and I will shed light as to the key considerations that they have ignored. They have not talked about how the government is not accountable. Cannot tell me that you will trust a country that scores 26 over 100 in the corruption index is trustworthy with your power sector. In conclusion, while my opponent has raised some noteworthy points, I have shown that the arguments ultimately collapse under scrutiny, and it's clear that deeper understanding reveals flaws in their argument and supports our stance. Thank you.
Thank the reply speaker for rounding up the debate for us. Please shake hands and we would take deliberations from here. Thank you. Hello, good evening. So after a very interesting round, myself and my amazing panelists came to a unanimous decision that the team proceeding to the finals of this debate is a team in opposition, Cherryfield schools. I'm going to explain how the round went and the criteria that the judges used to decide who won the debate. So I think something that both teams did well was to engage the key terms, privatization and economic development. So on the panel, we understood the nature of private organizations. Both teams had their different ideas on the nature and incentive of private organizations. Both teams also had their idea of what economic development truly means. But within this debate, the panel was able to buy that economic development can benefit the government, shareholders, investors, but the most important people that economic development matters to are the citizens. And so we're able to say, okay, what argument truly proves that citizens are able to live a better life? Would it be under privatization or not? The three arguments that ran within today's debate was one, the argument on efficiency. Opposition does well to tell us that these private individuals or firms do not want to lose their money. So when they put money into something, they have to get benefits. So they try to prove to us that these people will handle it more effectively. And any even average intelligent voter knows that that is the nature of privatization. When you put money into something, you want to get benefits out at the end of the day. They then show us that when privatization happens, because of the competitive prices, the prices may not even be that bad that citizens will not be able to patronize at the end of the day. They show us different countries that it has worked in. They tell us about the UK, they tell us about Ethiopia and all of these places where privatization has worked. What does opposition bring to the debate? They show us that in Nigeria it has failed. Now this is how we weighed it. They showed us how in other countries it has worked. The problem we had on the panel is that the examples given like UK and the rest, some are vastly different from the nature of Nigeria. So you don't prove that something can work simply because it has worked in another country. You need to contextualize, okay, this is the nature of Nigeria and this is why, because it worked in the UK, it can also work in Nigeria. We could not weigh that argument over what actually the first speaker said, where she said, we've tried it before and it has failed. So it means there is more evidence on the tendency for it to succeed and fail compared to the example you give on how it actually works in other countries at the end of the day. So in essence, okay, and I think opposition also tells us that if you say something is efficient, then how can it be that these private firms have to be bailed out consistently? It means that inefficiency will still exist within privatization. Then, that trampled down on the arguments that privatization would ensure efficiency, because she proves that they have to be bailed out at the end of the day, and the nature of Nigeria would not allow these things to happen. So on that clash of efficiency, we're able to give opposition the win. But secondly, they talk about impact on economic development. Now, remember that the arguments opposition gave in the debate is that more investors will come, there'll be more economic activities, people will get more jobs and all of those kind of things. What opposition does effectively to respond to that is to tell us that the nature of private organizations is this. They would want to focus their energy on urban areas where they are able to get more benefits at the end of the day. And realize that even from the first speaker definition, economic development means that people's standard of living would be better. So in what can economic development happen if people in rural areas are not able to afford these things, or even if they can pay for it, there is still the likelihood that if something bad happens, they cannot, clash all of these organizations because they are big powerhouses and you can really not do anything about it at the end of the day. So we think that on economic development, opposition is able to prove to us how the high prices that these private individuals or firms will put will be unfair to people because you're prioritizing profit over inclusion at the end of the day. But thirdly, the argument that was a clash in today's debate was on accountability, which I think is, even though it was not explicitly analyzed, is very important. Power is the right of citizens. So this was the picture we got from opposition. Imagine a world where something bad happens in electricity. You cannot protest. You cannot say the government has failed us. Why? Because they'll tell you we have privatized. It's the private people that are taking care of it at the end of the day. The problem with this is that there is not enough accountability for the government on something that is a fundamental right of people. And then secondly, even if something goes wrong, citizens are not that powerful to come against these private firms. Why? Because they have power, they can always win the lawsuits, especially when money is like a major language within the Nigerian system at the end of the day. What I think would have been better within this debate is more analysis. I think both teams can do better. So when you say, oh, it has failed in Nigeria, one of the questions I had is that in most instances, if a policy fails now, it doesn't mean that it internally cannot be considered to work again, which I think is something that you could even give a response to, right? So it means that if it is done in a different way, it can still work. So I think that one thing that can be done is that when you listen to an argument, oh, it has failed before, how is it likely that it would fail again if the circumstances are the same or different at the end of the day? So I think that both teams did well, for future instances, ensure that whatever assertion you're giving, there is enough analysis. How is it true it will fail again? Why is it likely that even if it has failed before, let's still consider it to work again? So it means that this debate was won on two bases: theoretical proofs versus practical proofs. Their evidence was more realistic to us compared to the theoretical explanations that we got from proposition. And that's how we unanimously came to opposition over proposition. Please feel free to come for personal feedback. So you guys are doing great. Well done. Thank you.